Hi, this is the new episode of the Marketing Meeting, and my guest today is Paul Meinshausen. He is the founder and CEO of Aampe. Aampe is a marketing automation platform for mobile apps. Welcome, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
I think the first connection that we had was through a friend, James Lorraine, and then he introduced me to you through a LinkedIn post. Then the second connection that we had was that you studied in the Middle East Technical University for 2 years, back in 2006, I guess.
That's
and I have
right.
a question about that.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
Very fond memories.
Yeah, and I know that you know a little bit. I don't know how much you know of Turkish, but you have been exposed to Turkish. What's that?
I don't know how much of your audience speaks Turkish, so I won't either bother them or confuse our English audience. But actually, my Turkish is not bad. I go back very regularly to Turkey, and my wife speaks it as well, and we have very close friends. So, yeah. So
I have
Turkey
a lot of Turkish,
yeah.
Well, I have quite a lot of Turkish connections listening to the podcast, so maybe one of them would listen to that. But my question is about the language, actually, because I know that Turkish, just correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have too much knowledge about that, but Turkish, Russian, they share the same morphology in terms of language formation. And it's, for example, for AI, it's harder to interpret those languages that has that specific morphology, if I'm correct.
I will say that it is. I don't think it's because of the morphology of the structure. There's nothing particularly more difficult about the Turkish structure with the verbs at the end and then how words are extended. These things are not a problem for the kind of language models and large language models that you would use. It's a problem of data. It's just the size of the corpus, so that the kind of data that we train and let the model train on, there's just nowhere near as much Turkish content in the world that's available to these companies to train on as there is English. And so it has more difficulty with it because it just has seen far less variety and variation and content in Turkish. So it's not that if there were as many Turkish speakers in the world as English speakers, there would be no problem. And there's a lot of things you can do to overcome that sample problem and that data set problem, which a lot of places they are doing that. So in India, there's a lot of work to create Hindi and Tamil and Telugu and all the languages in India to create regional versions, AI that is specific to those languages. There's even some work here in Singapore, where I am, that's doing that for Singlish, and of course, amazing work being done on Chinese. So, but yeah, there's nothing specific about the language that makes it harder. It's simply a matter of how much content, how much has been written in a way that is available for us to train the models on.
I guess it's the same case for all the other rest of the world languages. I mean, Spanish and English, those are the things the languages that are quite common and mostly used. But like for languages like Turkish and some other specific languages, it's going to be, I think, harder for, as I understand, for AI to, have a little less data in order to train and to educate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so on the LinkedIn profile of Aampe, there is a quote saying that the users will see really incredible results. There are some really nice numbers, interesting numbers, all without spending their precious time on segmenting the customer journeys. As a person who is so much into customer journeys through marketing, I would like to raise a question about that. Do we understand that we don't need any more marketers working on customer journeys any longer?
We don't need them working on customer journeys. It doesn't mean we don't need them. There's so much work to be done. Actually, I have a question for you. And you will know this is, I've spent most of my career building machine learning systems in data science and AI. I have not spent most of my career in marketing. And I am trying to learn as much as possible, as fast as possible, because many of our customers, if not most, are professional marketers. They come from that discipline and that profession. So you tell me, what is marketing about? What's your high level synopsis? I know it's a million things, but what's your synopsis? What's your summary?
Well, I mean, some people say that it's demand creation at the end of the day. Marketing is about demand creation and how much demand you can create for your business, which is kind of a very broader an answer to that question. But I think it's also about what are the goals that you want to achieve as a business. Because at the end of the day, what you do with marketing depends on what you want to do with the business. Is it more about, of course, it's going to be about numbers, financials. That's why companies are existing other than the NGOs, that their purpose is only to help the world and so on. So there will definitely be financial aspects that marketing is involved, but it all comes down to what type of a business and what type of a company you want to be. And then it starts with business strategy, and then marketing just comes, and brand comes after that business strategy, because brand and marketing is there to support the business goals and business strategies. And if that goal is to reach a specific audience and to make X amount of profits, then the marketing plan changes. So it's, again, I think it all boils down to the demand creation piece.
Okay.
But how do you create that demand is just like, that's why we are here, right? That's why my job exists. But it's not only me who's deciding how do we create demand. It's going to be together with the help of the, finance director, with the help of the founder, and so on. I don't know if that's...
Well, maybe if we just talk about that how for a second. How do you create demand? How do you get someone to demand your product, to care about it so much that they're like, give it to me, I'm giving you money for you to give me your service or your product. How does that happen? What's the fundamental components of it?
I think it's not only about most of the marketers you can see most of the marketers say that it's all about the customer and it's all about the consumer and what they want. But I don't agree that way, because it's mainly about so many things. It's about like the demand, the supply, the competition, and where you want to reach. So, I mean, it really depends on demand creation. By the way, I mean, like, I should really make it clear that demand creation doesn't only come through marketing. A salesperson is also creating demand. We are only here to help them create the demand. It's like at the end of the day, it's kind of a support function, if you call it. But then sales is a support function to marketing as well, because, it's just like a two-way world. But how I work is that my work always starts with understanding the business, not understanding customer first. I understand the business and the industry and the players, like demand, supply, competition, the product. And then I start to deep dive into the consumer piece. So it's like, how is the business looking and how the consumer landscape is looking and how we can get these together at the same place. That's how I start working on marketing and brand strategy, actually.
Right. Yeah, there's clearly so much to this, and it's often very hard for us to compress it and put it into a small version. If I can take a shot, I would say that the thing that distinguishes marketing to me most from other things, for example, the building of the product itself or operational elements of providing the service and the product, is communication. That the part of marketing is that you are communicating, that you're conveying information in some format. It might be an image. It might be words. It might be a combination of those, and the image might be dynamic in the form of video. Really, it all comes down, though, to telling a message. And as humans, I've never seen us be able to separate ultimately message from words, from the languages that we speak. And those words should have some content, and that content is complex in the sense that we want to tell you about the product, but we possibly also want to convey a feeling that you might have about the product. So the things that we're communicating are not just the tangible they're the intangibles. There's so many things, but ultimately it's all communication, and marketing is, and it often takes the form of a story, for example. So customer journeys are just a sort of almost like a tactic that's helped marketers to choose how and when to communicate. So what we do is we think about the normal ways that people interact with our business and our product, and we create an idealized representation of that interaction. In the old days, it would be like, oh, you open a magazine, you see an advertisement, you get excited about it, you go into the store, you find your way to the shelf that you need, you bring it to the front, and you check out. And that's the customer journey.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that as technology has evolved, we have more and more ways to interact with a business, and we do it in more diverse ways. I think as a society, we've gotten more diverse as people, and businesses have gotten more diverse in terms of the things that they offer. Right? I was just reading a New York Times article about Netflix, and I think they have 30,000 plus items that you can watch on Netflix. And this is true of so many businesses, so many options. So the fundamental job of the marketer is to communicate those options, to communicate why you would want to watch something using Netflix, et cetera, in their context, right? Customer journeys were one way of choosing what to communicate, because you'd say, well, at this part of the user journey, I'm going to say this. And I think what we've hypothesized with AMP, and I think the way I see the future of marketing is, to kind of come to your question, is that tactic is no longer the best way to communicate. In fact, it is a increasingly inefficient, inferior, even possibly counterproductive way to communicate. So the marketer's job is still to communicate. It's just not best done through the tactic of a kind of designed customer journey. It's just sort of like, just to kind of take an extremely different industry as just an example, when machine guns and automated weapons were developed in the early part of the 20th century in World War I, right? In Gallipoli and in Turkey, the way armies fought wars had to change, because they used to line up in front of each other and fire, because the rate of loading made it possible to do that. And when we developed automated weaponry, that just led to massive death, which was horrible, atrocious, not sustainable. It was just absolutely awful. So we had to move away from it because it just didn't work. That tactic no longer worked. And I think what AI is just increasingly revealing is the tactic of a customer journey no longer works. It's a terrible way to communicate. But that doesn't mean that we don't need marketers. What we need is humans to help communicate a business to its customers. Absolutely, we need that. We just don't need them to do certain things like create customer journeys.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you have the customer journey from a platform, or like from a tool that AI and machine learning is backed. But I mean, does that mean that you can rely on that customer journey that is created by the machine, or I mean, how confident are you about the customer journey that is created only by an AI or machine learning backed platform?
Well, think about it this way. So what's your favorite TV show these days? You mind if I ask this? What's your favorite TV show?
Well, I mean, you're going to be surprised, but I don't watch TV too much.
Okay. That's great.
The only series that I watched recently is Succession at HBO, and it was at a United flight on the way to and from Frankfurt.
Okay, all right, great.
I have a TV at home, but I don't use it.
That's a perfect description of what I mean by diversity. We cannot make assumptions about people and their interests. Let me ask you this. Do you watch content for educational purposes? Do you watch YouTube, for example?
I watch YouTube, but I don't watch it for educational purposes. I watch it to sometimes get product advice. For example, I'm going to buy a vacuum cleaner, and I'm going to, for example, yesterday I watched YouTube videos for Amazon videos, not YouTube videos, while I was trying to decide on a sound blocker because I'm at a new home right now and I couldn't decide where is best to, record. So I was watching the tutorials.
So you listen to product descriptions and product videos. What about podcasts? We're on a podcast right now. Do you listen to other podcasts?
Yeah, sure, I do.
Can I ask you what platform you use?
Apple.
Okay. All right. So podcast is a good example of a sector that hasn't done it as well, but it kind of illustrates the point, even in its not performing that well. There are way more podcasts than you and I could ever listen to. Fair enough, right? Like so many podcasts out there in the world, same as that there's so many TV shows in the world. So if any of those businesses, let's say Apple wants to get a particular podcast in front of you, when you open up the podcast player, how do you think, what determines what goes into the first slot that you see, in the second slot you see, in the third slot you see, in the fourth slot you see?
It's based on the other podcasts that I listen probably, but I usually skip those and then go to the library that I have and then pick from those.
Yes. Okay. So exactly what I meant. It illustrates it almost by virtue of it not doing well. So Netflix has 250 million plus subscribers who watch a lot of content, who pay attention very much to the recommendation that Netflix gives. Apple podcasts, not so great. I similarly mostly listen to what I already knew I wanted to listen to. I don't really pay attention to the recommendations. But I think we could both agree that we almost certainly don't think it'd be great for a marketer at Apple to sit there and decide which podcast goes in the first position and the second position and the third position. That probably wouldn't be a good idea. Not a good use of that marketer's time, right? Because
exactly
the podcasts you listen to are probably pretty different than the podcasts I listen to. And so if they were doing that, they'd have to somehow know me as Paul and use it. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So what do we rely on then to filter all of that content? Well, we rely on algorithms that look at past decisions in terms of what we consume of content. And then use those past decisions to inform options that could be selected in. And then there's other parts of the technology that run experiments on those options, et cetera. So you can see that for most forms of content selection, we don't have manual human decisions anymore. That doesn't mean that we don't have marketers doing things. We just don't have them choosing which position goes where.
I think I understand, although I challenged the customer journey piece a lot, but I'm with you because the dilemma of marketing is that, as a marketer, you should know that you need to segment, and because you cannot reach out to every single person. So that's why we need to do customer personas, and those personas are sometimes quite wide.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we can only reach out to 5 or 6 different of them when we are doing marketing as a person. And the other thing, which in that case, AI is solving it out, because I'm sure that it's still segmenting the customers into different pillars, but it's doing a smaller, a minor segmentation rather than doing a wider selection of segmentation, as far as I understand.
Yes, that's right. See, I think the segmentation is, I think, an amazing part of the creation process. So you need to do segmentation in the sense of imagining who you're speaking to. I once spoke to, I guess it was about a year ago, I was chatting with the chief revenue officer for one of the major podcast platforms. And it was right around the time, a little bit while after the really big Joe Rogan deal with Spotify. Spotify signed like $100 million deal with Joe Rogan for podcasts. And she was like, those days are gone. That happened, but that's not where the future is. The future is the fact that there are 10 or 100,000 people out there who are creating very small podcasts for 10 or 50 or 100 or 5,000 people. And there's so many of them, right? And the interesting thing is, a lot of those people are not creating that content, that podcast, for their neighbor or their friend at school. Some of them are, but many of them are creating that for some other person that they've never met in Gambia or in Indonesia, who are somehow connected and care about the same things and have a similar perspective, even though they come from, completely different backgrounds and everything else. And so the question is how can that marketing and that revenue team at that podcast platform enable all of those matches to be found so that 500 people here can find that one creator instead of everybody listening to Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's boring. So I think now the job, like all of those podcast creators have to be thinking about their audience in a very specific way. They can't say, I'm going to create this podcast that everybody's going to listen to. They have to imagine a very specific person. So that's amazing. And then what marketers have to do is realize, okay, for my platform, I've got all these possible audiences. I've got people who are listening podcasts to learn, and people who are listening to podcasts to enjoy themselves. So they have to do the segmentation in order to idealize like the persona, as you said, and create the content. What AI is now doing, though, is saying, all right, well, you focus on imagining those personas, imagining those segments, and focus on creating that content. Maybe you use even AI as part of that creation process. I don't know. Like maybe you give a prompt to do an LLM and it gives you a little snippet. Or you do it yourself. That's fine. Either way, both work, but it's still a marketer prompting the LLM ultimately, right? It's not a LLM just coming up with a million prompts itself. But then instead of the traditional means of that marketer then saying, all right, well, I've created this ad, I've created this piece of content. Let me go and figure out who it goes to. Because you've created content with this very small segment, very precise group of people in mind, very specific persona. Now you go onto your platform, you got 1 million users. How do you know which 500 out of those million are the ones that want that particular content you created? A customer journey is not going to help you, right? But AI, an AI system can help you take that content and find it for everybody else. Find it for the folks who want to hear it, who want to see it. So segmentation is really important as part of the creation process. It's not important in terms of saying, all right, now I'm going to take those 1 million users and I'm going to put them into all these boxes and then I'm going to force them to receive a message about this podcast. That's the part that doesn't make any sense. But the creation of it and like the ideation of like this kind of person in the world and this is who I'm creating content for, that is powerful. And now, because a marketer doesn't have to turn around and do all that operational workload of figuring out who gets their message, they can spend more time creating amazing stuff for more and more specific audiences so that everybody doesn't have to have that one same thing because that's all the marketer had time to create.
So like my next question on that would be like in the future, how can marketing teams help grow companies where AI and machine learning will be taking care of many of those tasks? At which functions or which tasks do you think that the marketer would still be able to help out with the expertise and with the knowledge as a human?
Yeah. I think it is that fundamental thing that we've been talking about is communication. That's where marketers can help. If you think about like a close friend, right? And if you were to recommend a podcast or a television series to them, and if you think about how you would describe that podcast to them, right? Imagine Succession since you watched that, right? So I can imagine a person watching Succession because it's really good acting. But I can also imagine someone who doesn't know anything about acting, but they love like the luxury and the cityscapes and the helicopters, right? Like they like imagining that life of luxury and wealth, right? I can imagine somebody else liking it because the storyline of just this family conflict is powerful to them, right? And you could have put those actors and made them like a poor working class family in New Jersey, and they would have watched the show. Not everybody, but some people, right? So you can imagine all these different characteristics. So now if you know your friend, you know what kind of person you are. Maybe they reject wealth. They have no interest in it. That's not what you would use to describe Succession. But you'd be like, ignore all that. It's about the people. The people are the same, regardless of being billionaires or not. And the show does such a good job of conveying. And for somebody else, you would describe the actors, right? So the point is that when you know that audience, you can describe that show in 5 minutes or in 2 minutes in a conversation in a way that gets that person excited to watch that show. There you are. You're a marketer. But you do that job so well because you know your audience and you know the show, you know your product. And that is what we should have more marketers doing. Now, what I see marketers doing is being so busy doing all this manual operational work and no way of knowing who their audience is because they're a faceless, nameless mass of users and data in an app, right? So they don't describe their product in 100 different ways. They describe it in one way and then they blast that one message to everybody. And so if they don't have all that operational workload, again, they can spend more time beautifully communicating the value, the interest, the attractiveness of a product to their specific audience, and then do it again and again and again and again, so that we get more and more versions of communication. And then as end users, wouldn't it be amazing if businesses could speak to us that way? Because we would save so much time, we would get to the point that we care about so much more, and we would enjoy the whole experience more. So I think communication and storytelling is where more and more of our time and attention should go. That's marketing. So I see a very rich future for marketing, rather than peril.
What I see is that because, I worked at one of the biggest marketing and brand companies in the world, which is Nike. And there's like a huge brand marketing team and there's like a huge process that everyone follows. And as I move out of Nike like 6 years ago and I'm working with smaller companies, what I see as a difference is that the customer journey, even at the companies like Nike, it's sometimes done through a person and that person's assumption about who the customer is and what their insights are, what their bottlenecks are, and so on. But still, within Nike, for example, since you have to present to so many other levels, is that your ideas is fact-checked and, questioned and criticized and sometimes approved by so many layers in the business that you cannot be wrong. I mean, if you assume that Utter is not watching TV, whereas maybe I'm watching TV time to time and I'm just like on social instances, I don't share it with friends. But then that is already fact-checked and at some, pillars in the organization, even before the times from where we had like lots of data in our hands. So that's why I think what AI and the new systems and platforms are helping us out is that it removes the personal assumptions of a marketer. Because in an organization like Nike, there are like so many levels that the idea has been checked. So when you go out to the market and you communicate as a brand, as Nike, that idea is already checked for so many levels. But when you're a small company, you don't have those layers in your organization, and that organization is not used to working with so many marketers in their company. So that, you just rely on the assumption of one person sitting there as acting as a marketing person or whatever. So I think what the new world for marketers are just also like for founders or for companies, smaller companies especially, is that it will really help us fact check and help us justify our ideas and make sure that they are really correct. Our assumptions are really correct. Because, otherwise every day you have to spend your time, trying to understand the customer day by day, because, you think one day you think that you understand the customer and the other day they do something that is really opposite to what you do. And then you said, okay, I need to go out in the market and, talk to them more. It just reduces this amount of operational things, as you said, because I'm a huge believer of that, by the way. The marketers that are working right now in the industry are not equipped so well with understanding and harnessing data. And then there are like data engineers, data people that that can really understand and, mine data and get some conclusions out of it. I feel that those two operations, those two functions need to work closer together. And if they cannot work close together, then there should be a liaison between them. Either any other person who is like better in understanding data or better in understanding marketing should be helping them to understand that connections. That's what I feel. But we need to evolve to the next level of marketers. And then data people need to evolve to help the marketers succeed as well. So it's like a two-way communication, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's so much room for better collaboration. Again, better communication between different aspects of a business. And I think there'll always be differences between a company as big as Nike and a small startup or even a small SME is maybe a lifestyle business. Maybe you run a coffee shop or you print t-shirts that are really cool and sell them to a few thousand people. There's differences in those. And I don't think we need to see consolidation such that marketing means the same thing at both. But I think both sides, the big company and the small company, have room for improvement, room for growth, room for betterment. And I think that's what technology is.
It's I think about like efficiency overall, because when you are Nike, you have those people in place, but your business and your data flow is much bigger than a smaller company. So, it's all about efficiency that you have to create.
I think it's also creativity. It's also beauty. I don't think like everything. I think Nike could be so much more beautiful than it is. It's classically considered beautiful. It's an amazing company that has good design and good marketing, right? But there's more it could do. It could be better. It's going to happen. I think that you're seeing more and more products being developed that compete on that. And then so what you need to do is more and more stories that communicate. And that's why the product catalog expands. So you've got something like Air Jordans, which speak to a particular community. And then you've got, just comfortable loafers or sneakers that speak to a different community. And the quality across both of those could improve in terms of the story you're telling. Not everyone at Nike has to be, not every customer of Nike has to be an aspiring athlete who's just ready to just do it. Right. And I think Nike
exactly.
knows that. And so, I think AI is ready to help a company like Nike quite a bit.
So I have another question, which is like, probably you don't like these questions and you get so many of these questions, but I have two psychiatrists at my family, my sister and her husband. And so I'm also quite interested in that area as well. Because marketing is also about human psychology and human behavior.
Yeah.
So what I know is that human brains are so complicated. When you even look at one of the best, watched TED Talks or to Harvard Business Review talks and so on, it's about how can we be happy? That's the dilemma of the human being. It's hard to understand what makes us happy, even at this time of AI and, machines in our lives and so on. And this has been the case like hundreds of years ago. Women were trying to find the answers to the question of how can we be more happy. This is one thing on site. The other thing do you think machine learning and AI would be able to, understand the reasonings of a human's brain that is so complicated in creating like customer journeys and understanding human behavior and so on? How does this correlate in your mind?
I think there's different ways one could approach a conversation like this. There's no way that technology is going to remove this, as long as we can remember, as long as humans have been around, this existential aspect of our lives of what is what is life about? What is the meaning of life? Why are we happy? None of us can answer that question, even for ourselves. There's no way, right? We don't know. And in fact, but what do we do? What do we do as humans? One of the oldest things that you can do, but also the thing that continues to be one of the most effective things you can do, is you can turn to another person and you can talk to them and you can communicate. And somehow that process of communicating helps us understand. Not like the one answer, but just a process of understanding that is constantly recurring. It's constantly, the questions continue. Every answer brings a new set of questions, and answers fade over time and change, and we change, and all of this change, right? So it's not, AI doesn't solve these problems. It just becomes a new part of the process of communication and a new part of the process of answering these questions. So it's interesting. I think we can introspect and we can project what AI could do as part of that process, but I think it's just going to be part of that process. It's going to be part of that communication with ourselves and communication with others around us. And hopefully it's better in 200 years the way it is now, better than it was 200 years ago. But I certainly have no looking glass or a special crystal ball that would tell me, how that happens. But I generally have an optimistic, positive outlook that it gets better.
The most important thing that I get from your answer was like, it will solve some of the problems, but not all. For example, that made me think about like my coffee experience in the mornings, because I just came back from a coffee. And then the girl knows that I always order a pour over in the mornings, and I would like to have like a saucer. Although the mug doesn't need a saucer, I would like to have that saucer, and I always get like a sparkling water on the side. And this is the amount of knowledge that girl needs to know. And then that is already personal to me. But she doesn't necessarily need to know that I'm a little bit stressed out because I'm coming back to podcasting and I have a few questions in my mind to ask you. And she doesn't need to know that because it's irrelevant to her process. I see it like that. I mean, human beings will still be so sophisticated and complicated time to time and unpredictable. But those complications, you don't expect AI or machines to understand every complexity of a human being, but it will solve so many different things categorized in our lives. Yes. And we will still be so complex, complicated, and confusing and have so many maybe mental issues in our mind, but those would be irrelevant to so many things that we do in a day-to-day life, Yeah. That's what I feel.
Yes, I think that's a nice summary. Yeah.
I have one final question about AI, which is the topic of privacy and trust. And I'm sure that you have many things to say there, because machine learning and its capabilities to serve to us only depends on how much of data we are willing to share with machines, because machines can learn as we share data, as we interact with them and so on. They can understand us better. So when there's like too many issues around privacy and trust, and also like many of the apps and companies blocking other companies' privacy paths, how do you see on this going in the future, and how can we solve this dilemma of privacy and trust on the way to grow AI?
Privacy and trust are not objective kind of constant facts or conditions. They are themselves perceptions, social constructs. So it's not as if like privacy is a thing and then we somehow adapt to it. We actually have to ask ourselves what privacy even means. Kind of historically, privacy was not a concept. When you lived in that village and you all slept in the same room, there's no concept the way we think of privacy as a privacy.
It's just like you close the curtains at night. That's it.
That's right. That was the reality we lived in. But even back then, right, there was a need for privacy in the sense that a big part of the push into the US was people trying to like go find their own plot of land, be far away. They didn't want neighbors that were close. So we're always in this push and pull between other people. How much do we want to share with other people, and how much do we not want to share with other people? And a lot of the times we actually want to share. I mean, that's why, teenagers are filming every element of their life on their phone, right? Because they want to be, they want to lose their privacy, in the sense that the best thing they can imagine is that everybody wants to know what they're doing. It's the exact inverse of privacy. And so our own concept of it is changing so much. I think it's not really about solving for it, it's about evolving it. Safety, for example, is a huge element, and it's a trade-off. A trade-off of privacy. So I live in Singapore, and I forget the statistic, but most of the public areas we live in have security cameras, have government-run cameras. That's data in the sense that someone could watch it. And my wife and I were biking this morning, and I have a small speaker on my bike. And we were talking about whether it was okay to leave it on there. And we did. Because in Singapore, you barely even have to lock your bike. And one of those reasons is because there's high social trust. So people don't take things. But also there's high consequences. If you did take something, you would get punished pretty severely. And part of the infrastructure of that is cameras. So are there benefits to that? Absolutely. Are there trade-offs to it? Also, yes. So I think I find privacy overdetermined, and when people talk about it as just like one thing, I think they're missing out on the true complexity. I also think that there's an element of this, which is, what does it mean for us to improve as a civilization, for us to become, for example, more wealthy? What is one of the most constant things that the wealthy have that the less privileged, less wealthy don't have? That's a question for you. What do you think it is?
Well, yeah. Access to resources to grow further.
I love that answer. And I think that's a really nice angle on it. Let me take that and add something to it. So a lot of times people will say something like a Lamborghini, or a really fancy house, or a private jet, or a yacht, or, all of these things, right? But what do you need for all of those things? You need support. Because if you have a jet, somebody's got to fly it, and it's probably not you. And if you have a Lamborghini, somebody has to service it, right? And if you have a big house, somebody has to help you with it. Can you imagine having a massive mansion and you had to clean it and maintain it? No way, right? So all of those things change your life. But the really fundamental thing that a wealthy person has that non-wealthy people don't is assistance. They have people who take decisions off their plates, who take effort out of their lives. They say, you don't have to book your tickets. I will book them for you. You don't have to call and reserve a dinner spot at the restaurant you want to go to. I will do that. You don't have to go and figure out what this book was that you were thinking about. I will go do that research for you. Now, the thing is that the implication of that is you talked about, ordering the coffee, and that person doesn't need to know you. If you had a personal assistant who was getting your coffee every day, they would know you. They would know what mood you were in, and whether you want a Turkish coffee or like a latte, or maybe the different varieties you tend to have, and how those interact with your emotions, and whether you're having the coffee that reminds you of your childhood versus the coffee that you enjoy. But what's the corollary of that is that person knows you in an intimate way. And it's strange when you start to have that. It's like, oh, this is very strange. But everybody gets used to it. I'll tell you, everybody who's
and it's nice if
they get used
the person who's doing your coffee knows you.
She knows you. He knows you. Your assistant knows you in a very deep way, and you're just like, okay, yeah, that's my habit, or that's my foible, or that's my problem, whatever. Like, it's fine. Same way your partner knows you in a very intimate way. So the question is just, can a piece of software know you in that way? Because the real question is, can it help you in that way? And if it can help you in that way, I'm willing to bet the vast majority of people are completely okay with that happening because they want the assistant. They want the help. They want their own life to be more focused on the things they care about rather than all the mundane things of running out to get the milk or, take care of the chores or pick up the thing. Like they don't want to do all that stuff. And so if software could help them, they would be totally fine with it. When people talk about privacy, I usually think that the real problem there is, which is very important, is ineffectiveness. What they hate is when somebody knows them and doesn't do anything for them. That's the thing that's terrible. Imagine an assistant who follows you around and just constantly shoves something in your face that you don't want. But that's basically what marketing does in a lot of cases, right? It just doesn't really know us. So it speaks very generically and it tells us about crap we don't want. We usually complain in terms of privacy. But actually what we're complaining about is ineffectiveness. It just doesn't help us. Anyway, that's my view.
No, I liked it. I loved it a lot. So as a wrap up, I have a few quicker questions. So what is one thing in this new year, 2024, AI would change in businesses or in marketing, let's say?
What it will change in businesses? I think it's already just really rapidly changing the way businesses communicate with their customers. Which is what we've been discussing all along. It's happening. I think for marketers, it's going to change the kind of tools that you use and the practices you use. And I think that is where the disruption can be more painful or less painful, more uncomfortable or less uncomfortable, depending on how we respond and adapt to those changes. If we hold on to like our expertise that we've won hard over 20 years, then we will probably get beaten down by the markets, by our employers, etc. But if we're kind of like, you know what, that's fine. I knew the thing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but that's not the thing anymore. And we let that go and we say, well, what should I know now in order to do my job? Then I think we'll be a lot more successful.
Perfect. So you are also running your own company, and this is a question that I'm always curious to hear. What are like top few advices that you can give to someone who is just starting up their businesses? It doesn't need to be related with AI or whatever.
Yeah, sure. No, I wouldn't be. So I would actually, I'll say the most important thing you can do is work with really great people. And I would actually challenge that I don't really run my own business. I work with amazing people and we run the business together. It's not semantics. It's actually a really deep, important point. And the most important thing you could do as you're getting a business doesn't mean that person is necessarily going to be your co-founder or partner, but you better figure out how to find people who you really enjoy working with and who add a ton of value to you, and hopefully you can add value to them. So that's one thing. Second thing is to really think about your own ability to perform over time, which means your ability to recover and to rest. Anything you do that's important or valuable is not going to be done in this quarter, in this month, even in this year. It's going to be done over a much longer stretch of time. And hopefully that's an amazing thing. That's not a bad thing. That's not like, oh man, it's going to take so long. No, this life is all you have as a human. Like that's it, right? And so hopefully you spend many, many years doing the thing that you enjoy and building the thing that you care about. But the best way to do that, ensure that happens, is to be able to rest in the moments that you're not working, so that you can work in the moments that you are. Thinking about that psychology element of it, but just your own ability to sustain over time is the thing that I think about a lot, and I recommend to other entrepreneurs, founders, independent consultants, anybody who doesn't have the structure of a big company telling them what to do.
Perfect. Thank you. And the last two things was that what's one business book that you would recommend to someone?
On that last theme, I'd say the one book I would recommend is it's called The Art of Learning by a former chess player and a Tai Chi hands champion athlete. And that book recommends another book that I think has more of a business angle, but I'll leave it at The Art of Learning, and you can find the Easter egg in that book that recommends the second book. But I think it's an amazing book for anyone trying to build a business or even just get better at something, no matter what.
Art
it
is.
Of
Learning. I'll keep that in mind.
Yes.
And in Singapore, what's your favorite coffee place?
Ooh, my favorite coffee place? So I would say as a style of life, I tend to reject the concept of favorites in favor of constant change. I don't like having one thing. So I will say I am rotating coffee places constantly. That's part of the joy. But one that I'm going to a lot these days is a little cafe called the Little Rogue Cafe.
The little like
what? The Little Rogue Cafe.
Oh, okay.
It's in a little shop house. It's open onto the street, and they serve really excellent coffee and nice, kind of comfortable tables. You can sit down and do some work. It's a nice, very nice place.
I hope to go there on my next visit to Singapore because it's a place that I loved. I stopped over there when I was flying to Sydney just before pandemic. And I also have a favorite coffee place back like 5 years ago in Singapore, which is probably you would know that it's the Glass House. In the city center. Yeah. I mean, we didn't have too much time to explore, but it was a really nice coffee house tucked in like a small garden and like a small coffee shopping place, I guess. Yep, and then I hope to try your coffee place as well.
Yes,
and these
please.
are the what I like about these final questions are these are the questions that if I do a Google search, I cannot get those answers. So this is something that can be only human to human. Of course, finding the best coffee place and so on. That can also be through Google search and so on. But you know that they won't be coming from a real person that you interact and you get like a story behind that recommendation. Thank you so much for your time. It's past midnight in Singapore and we are still chatting about AI. Thank you for accepting my invitation to be here. And I hope we can, like in a year around this time, we are talking about so many other things about AI, not only the basics that I asked today, but many more complicated things. As I also, as a marketer, I learned them as well.
Yes, all the best for your journey. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you.